Welcome to Flight Lines, the morning coffee. Today, we're going to have a discussion on something that's very important to me. It's been important to me my whole career, and that's how we educate our young people. And we're in a situation today in our school systems around the country, particularly here in Florida, that we need changes. And we can either change by choice or we can change by crisis. And that's unfortunately changing by crisis is often how we deal with things. Um, I want to go over some things that are currently happening in our school district. This podcast will come out on this coming Friday. And on the website, there'll be an article that I've written that is going to highlight some of the things I'm going to talk about this morning. But I purposely didn't put it in the paper because I didn't want to create a big controversy, adding to what's already going on in the newspaper and in the community with our particular school district, the School Board of Highlands County. Um, what's at issue is the declining enrollment of students that aren't going full-time equivalent, FTE as we call it, in our school district. And that's how our school districts are funded. I'm going to read my notes here. There's approximately about $9,400 per year per student that go to the schools to fund the school district. Now, when you have declining enrollment, as we've had here in Highlands County, that has a dramatic impact on the school board's budget. And recently, the school board of Highlands County has fallen below its level of reserve cash that's required by state law because of declining enrollment. And as a result, the superintendent has eliminated 20 district level positions. She's also had certain administrators that haven't been cut take a 2% cut in their pay. And one of the other recent proposals has been to have a la carte class offerings to students who are not in the school district, say they're at a private school, or they're homeschooled, or whatever it might be, but they're not enrolled full-time in our school district. Those students will be able to come to the schools and take a course, whether it's a core academic course or an elective course, for a certain level of cost. And they won't be entitled to transportation and some of the other benefits that a full-time student would be receiving from the school district, but they will be able to take those classes. And it's a way to help relieve some of the budget issues, but it's not going to solve in any real big significant way the shortfall that has happened because of declining enrollment. And then the other thing is that maybe these kids, when they come back into the schools and take some of these courses that they would want to take, they may decide, well, maybe I should go back and be a full-time student in the district. And that may be part of the plan. But school choice here in Florida allows parents to access, and the exact program I'm going to read from my notes here is the Florida Employment Scholarship for Education Options. And that will provide parents through an application process anywhere between $8,000 and $8,800, maybe close to $9,000 that they can use to pay for a student's tuition at a private school, charter school, whatever it might be. And that's some significant money. And you can probably see it's almost equivalent to the FTE that the schools would get from full-time students. So when you take that amount of money out of the school district with enrollments that are not there because students have gone to an alternative option as far as their education, it has a dramatic impact. Now, where do I stand on this? I'm in favor of students being having the options of going to an alternative method, than the school district they may be in. my own kids, over the years have been homeschooled, and then sometimes a combination of both. But I think it's important that parents have a choice, to do the best way that they can to have their child educated. Um, I believe our school districts do a wonderful job, and I've been in this school district, Highlands County Schools, for over 25, almost 30 years, various levels. I've been a classroom teacher. I've been an administrator. I've been the teachers union president and chief negotiator. Um, so I know some of the dynamics and how the system works. And I believe the people in our school district, the administrators and the teachers, and are people that care deeply about educating our children in the best way possible. Um, the question is, what is the best way possible? And here's where I feel we need to make a change. And the change is, I would say, be evolutionary rather than revolutionary. But when you really get down to what it is and how it'll work, it would be kind of revolutionary. And we have seen this, and people in our school district, the administrators, and myself, when I was union president, I accompanied some of the administrators and teachers on a tour of various places that do things a little differently. And I've seen some of the ways school districts deliver education to the students that they serve. And these methods and these alternative ways of doing it differently than what we've done for, many, many, many years works. And what I'm going to explain is what I would call project-based learning. Um, it really comes down to this. Students aren't going to be engaged and invested in what they're being offered as far as learning something unless they, one, think it's valuable and it engages them in a way that they're excited about being there. And there's been two programs that I've been involved in that I started here in the school district that really are fine examples of that. One is the Green Dragon Chair Company that I developed when I was a uh, shop teacher at Lake Placid High School. Now, a wood shop program, is a valuable course because it helps young people learn about tools and safety and how to make things, how to design things, how to work through a plan, sequential steps for what they want to do on a project, team building, working together. All these things are important skill sets that will transfer into life and help them be more productive. Um, but rather than making, the bookshelf or the gun rack or whatever it might be that normally sometimes are projects that kids are interested in, we changed it around. We started a student-run business that developed um, and marketed Adirondack chairs and accessories, and the students were excited about it. It was a student-run business. The money that came back from the sales of the chairs, and we sold over 3,000 Adirondack chairs and accessories like side tables and rockers and child's chairs and ottomans and those types of things. Over 3,000 chairs, and all the money that was developed from that went back into the shop because we didn't have a really large, to speak of, any budget for replacement and maintenance of the tools and the machines. So I went right back into the program. Now, I couldn't give the kids, any kind of part of those funds that came back, but we did a monthly profit and loss evaluation of what we did, the materials that came in, the cost of manufacturing the chairs compared to what we sold them for on eBay, and what was our gross profit, what was our net profit, what was the cost of business, and all the types of things that go into running a business. And then we came up with a profit. And if they had a C average, they got a point. We had a scale based on the number of dollars that were our profit. And if they had a C average, they got 1 point towards their final grade. If they had a B average, they got 2 points. If they had an A average, they got 3 points. And those points added up over time, and they were excited. So they saw something in it for them. Very, very successful program. Unfortunately, when I left to become an administrator at the district level, the shop teachers that came behind me didn't see the value in it and didn't continue it, which was a shame. But be as it may, that's what happened. When I came back to while I was also there at Lake Placid, and after I came back as an administrator at one point, we had the aviation and aerospace program that started with just uh, my classes at Lake Placid. I saw in the frameworks of the Florida Department of Education, there was an aerospace class, and so we started an aviation program about almost 30 years ago now at Lake Placid in my shop class. And in the first year, we actually built a full-size airplane with a community member. It was a Challenger two-place experimental aircraft. And I found I couldn't get 24 kids involved in it all the time. So we then went to, after we finished the aircraft, we formed a partnership with a local radio control club. And so we went out behind the school and the old track, and we built and flew radio-controlled aircraft, which the only difference between the radio-controlled aircraft and a full-size airplane is just the size. The physics and the dynamics, the center of gravity, all those types of things, drag, lift, are all the same. So we had that program going on for a while, and it expanded and grew. Eventually, we're able to take it to the Sebring Airport. We had a building constructed through the EAA chapter and a generous donation from the Ray Foundation, and the program just grew to be a nationally recognized best practice. But all based, again, on project-based learning. The kids that built chairs, they were learning teamwork and how to solve problems and safety and, many, many transferable skills that would go into whatever area they wanted to go in their lives. And the same thing with the aviation and aerospace program. And I was often asked, what are you doing with that program? Are you training pilots? Are you training aircraft mechanics? What is it you're doing? And we were doing those things for some of the students, but the primary purpose was to develop options and opportunities for the young people involved in the program so they would understand what was out there. Many of them have never been near or in an airplane, which we arranged through the Young Eagle flights with the EAA to take a flight in an airplane. And it truly unlocked their perception of what was out there and what they could get involved in. Again, a very, very successful program. But the bottom line about this whole way of doing it, it was project-based. They were engaged. They were excited. They was hands-on. We were dealing with physics and history and all sorts of content areas through the aviation and aerospace program. For example, there really hasn't been any significant aviation and aerospace development if there hasn't been some sort of world conflict or issue. When Sputnik went around the world for the first time, when the Russians put up the first satellite, our whole space program kicked into high gear. You look at the world wars we were in and how aviation played a part in those conflicts, all right up through the Cold War with the development of the SR-71 as a reconnaissance and spy aircraft. I mean, all these things were based on an urgent national need. And so when you look at what's available to kids today, they need to be exposed to what their options and opportunities are. But the way to get them excited about learning is get them involved with hands-on project learning. Now, change doesn't happen easily, especially in a school system, and not just Highlands County, but school districts around the world, around the country, I mean. We're used to the way we were taught. Now, in a couple of days, I'm going to turn 77 years old, so I've been around for quite a while. I've been teaching in various venues from private schools and colleges and university levels and public schools in various grades for over 50 years. There isn't much that I haven't seen, and I have, during that time, there's been this initiative and that initiative come out, and this is the new great thing, but all we've really done is put another label on something we've always done. um, with the exception of some of the project-based learning. But we need to change what we're doing, and we need to change it in a way it's by choice and not by crisis. Uh, some years ago, we toured a school in the East Coast, and for the life of me, I can't remember the school district it was in. But we took a bunch of administrators. I was a union president at the time, so I was involved in it. And we went over to this school, this high school, and we saw where they were integrating all the core areas interdisciplinary. So you may have a language arts class that was involved with an art class or a shop class or whatever. I mean, they were cross discipline, cross curriculum planning and working. So um, people were learning the core elements of what they were needing to learn to graduate, but in a way that engaged them, excited them, and it was all project based. And then most recently, a year or so ago, I was in part of a tour over in Pinellas County where the school district has partnered with the business community to have kids being involved in the whether it be diesel mechanics or cybersecurity or health and nursing and all the different types of things that are going on in the community. The the community business community came in and co-taught and sponsored these programs. And again, kids were engaged, they were excited, they saw a path after they left high school of an area they might want to explore as a career. And it was a beautiful example of project-based cooperative learning. Um, and we were excited about it. The people that went there, the school district, school board members that attended, and the administrators, and some others, some community members that have businesses here in Highlands County, were excited. Said this is a great model, but it's going to take effort. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources that are in limited supply. But somehow down the road, we're going to need to change what we do. Now, my personal history in education started before I was out of high school. I always wanted to be an architect. That was my overall plan. And so when I was in high school, I took every drafting course I could take. And I enjoyed it. I have a knack for visualizing things in my mind in 3D and be able to put them on paper, which is a pretty cool skill to have as an architect. But I was really interested in becoming an architect. And as I was taking my drafting classes, I found that I had a skill as far as spatial relations and understanding how things would look in 3D in my mind. The drafting classes were very easy for me, and some of my classmates weren't as they didn't have the same type of perception that I had, and I wound up helping them on many of the drafting assignments. And one day, my teacher, Mr. Freck, called me over and said, "What do you want to do after you graduate?" I said, "Yeah, I want to go to school and be an architect." He said, "Well, that's pretty good. You'd probably be pretty good at that." But then he said to me something that just rocked me. He said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a teacher?" I said, "No, not really." He says, "Well, yeah, you might want to consider that." Well, let's couple that with an experience I had with my first paying job at the Morristown YMCA in Morristown, New Jersey. I was 16 at the time, and I was able to get and I don't know how they did it being that young, but I was able to earn a paycheck by teaching swimming, and I was one of many swimming instructors in classes and helped the other senior instructors. But one day, Bob Freeman, the athletic director, came by and said, "I'd like you to take your own class." And I said, "Oh, wow, how many kids are going to be in it?" And he said, "One." I said, "What? What do you mean one?" He says, "Well, little Annie, who at at that time, um, I'm not sure the label we had, but now we are called a special needs child. No one could teach her how to swim. And so he decided to let me take her individually and teach her how to swim. And we did. And the day that she swam across that deep end of the pool to me on the other side, and then, latched onto the gutter when she got to the side of the pool and looked up at me and made that eye contact, man, that was it. I knew at that point what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be a teacher. Um, I don't know why it happened that way, but that was the trigger that said to me, I've got a gift. I've got the ability to do something and help other people. And then, Mr. Freck said that to me in the drafting class. Well, I wound up going to Trenton State College in Trenton, New Jersey, and to get an industrial arts degree, focusing on what we call graphic rep, which was all the drafting and design classes, which were very much more extensive than the high school programs. I actually wound up helping, again, students in the college level put everything together in the drafting class. But here's the other thing that was really remarkable. In that curriculum as an industrial arts teacher, I was also, and I'm in my mind, I'm going to go around the building and remember the different labs that were there, but I was certified to teach plastics and ceramics, um, printing, photography, all the drafting classes, commercial and industrial wiring, residential wiring, metal shop, auto shop, and wood shop. Those were the areas that I'm currently certified to be able to teach at the high school level. And when I, got out of school, I had a job open to me at a middle school where I do a student taught. But there was something else that came in my life that I went with another way. And that was when I was a senior in college. It was in the middle of the Vietnam War. Things were going on hot and heavy, and my draft number was 206. I called my draft board and said, towards the end of the year in November, December, I said, "Where are you? What number are you going up to?" And they said, "Oh, we're about 156 or so, and we don't expect to get above 180." So I dropped my student deferment, went 1A. Well, towards the end of December, I called him up and I said, "Where are you?" He says, "We're 196 and climbing." And I said, "Oh boy, I could be drafted here pretty quickly." And I didn't mind serving. I mean, that wasn't an issue with me, but I wanted to do it on my terms. So I went to the Air Force recruiter and talked to him, and they sent me to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey for 2 days. They did everything physically you could do to a person to make sure that I was physically fit and able to do what they wanted in an Air Force pilot. Then the next day, I went through a battery of tests. Now, I had done some flying with a neighbor who was same age as I am, and he had his pilot's license, and so I knew a little bit about flight and the panel. So I passed everything, and I was a competitive swimmer at the time, at the peak of my career in college, and I was physically fit, so I passed all those things. Well, they didn't get up above 198 or close to 200 or whatever it was, so I wasn't going to be drafted. I had formed a relationship with the recruiter, and they were hot to trot to get me to sign up. And after I graduated, I was working as a waterfront director at a community in northern New Jersey. And one of the people who had a cabin on the lake was a colonel in the Air Force. And so I would talk to him from time to time about what I could do and should do in the Air Force. And so I was kind of excited about doing that. I wanted to go into, I didn't want to fly fighters. I had a fraternity brother who's an F-4 pilot. And I knew about that side of the equation, but I said I wanted to go into the heavies so I could transfer to the airlines after that. Well, um, I am now out of school. I'm working as the waterfront director, and I go to my post office box because I lived in a small town with some friends. And I pulled out this letter from the Air Force, and this was Tuesday, and it said, "Sign this and get it to us by Friday, and we'll see you at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas for Officers Candidate School and pre-flight training." Great. I signed it. I went to my postmaster, Mr. Holbert, and I said, "How can I get this to them by Friday?" And he laughed and he said, "Don't worry, John. All you have to do is get it postmarked by Friday. They'll still take you." I didn't know any better. So I put it in my pocket. I was late for work, and I went and did my daily routine. And then I came back to the post office the next morning. I was about to drop the letter in the post office box, and there was another letter in my mailbox from Indiana University giving me a full ride through grad school. And I had applied to Indiana, um, but I didn't have the money to go because I had just finished paying my way through undergrad. Well, I called the Air Force recruiter, Stan, who I gotten to know pretty well in Trenton, and I said, "Hey, I don't know what to do. I've got the letter from you guys from the Air Force all signed, ready to go, but I've also got this free ride, grad school, full scholarship for my master's from Indiana University. What should I do?" And he paused for a minute and he said, I shouldn't tell you this, but go get your master's and then come see us, which I did. The master's I got was in outdoor education, environmental education, and recreation, um, from one of the leading schools in the country at that time, and I believe it still is. Indiana University is one of the best schools for that particular thing. And I got involved in that type of area because during my college days, I was involved in a program similar to Outward Bound in Knowles Outdoor Leadership School, teaching rock climbing and canoeing, whitewater canoeing and camping and hiking, all those types of things. I was into that very much so. So that's the type of program I was gonna go to at Indiana. Well, he said, "Go get your master's." So I did, and when I was finished, I called the Air Force up again, and they said, "No, we're not taking pilot candidates. We're just doing navigators." So I didn't go. So there's a background there, which led me into an area of education that when you look at the things that Outward Bound does and Knowles Outdoor Leadership School, where you take young people and adults out into the wilderness and teach them team building and problem solving and self-sufficiency and all those types of things, that's another area of project-based hands-on learning. And so I've spent most of my career in that particular format where people are totally engaged in the situation and learning how to do what they need to do to get the task and the project done. Um, John Dewey said it, one of the founders of American education, people learn by doing. And you think about the things that you've learned in your life, I would say most of the time you've learned it by doing it and getting involved in it. And when you get down to the very basics of how we should educate our children, they need to be engaged. They need to be involved. They need to be invested in whatever they're being presented with. They need to understand why it's important, not just it is important, and you sit down and you listen, and I'll tell you how we're going to do this. But what you need to do, I'm going to hide my camera here. It's a little in the sunlight. Um, but the way we've taught ourselves over the years needs to change, and if the students don't know why it's important and what the value is for them to learn what we're presenting to them, they're not going to do it. Yeah, they'll play the game, they'll do the tests, they'll do whatever they do to get a passing grade so they can get out of the system, but it's not really effective. If the students are involved and they're engaged, and if they know how much you care as a teacher about them and what you're doing, then they'll care about their role in it. Um, it's just basic human nature, and that's the type of thing we need to foster with our school districts. And so when we look at the idea of project-based learning, where students are engaged and they're invested in what's going on, and they see the value and they see where it may lead them, then I think it's going to have an impact on how we educate our children. And so, what I'm saying in broad terms here, school districts need to provide something as good, if not better, than the alternatives that students have open to them with private schools and alternative schools and different things like that. If we're going to maintain our student enrollment. Um, is that going to be a challenge for the school districts? Absolutely. Is it going to be a challenge for the Department of Educations at the state level? Absolutely. Now, they're providing funding for alternative ways for kids to learn, which is, again, choice is good. I think choice is always a good thing. But they also need to provide resources to school districts so they can provide a meaningful, engaging, hands-on project-based learning system, not the what I would call, what others have called the industrial education system, where you're sitting in rows in a classroom and, teachers will try as hard as they can to engage them, make it exciting, get them involved. Um, but unless you can cross curricular your content, um, it's gonna be too little, maybe too late. One of the things we did with our aviation aerospace program, we did accomplish this, is that it did qualify as a required science credit. So it took off the plate of having to have a number of science credits to be able to graduate. You could take this elective and it would also serve one of the requirements for a science credit, which was great because when you look at aviation and aerospace, we're talking about physics in all the laws of physics apply to the laws of flight and that sort of thing. And then another one I hope we would have been able to do, which maybe we still can, is history. It could involve a history credit because, again, like I said before, there hasn't been any significant aviation and aerospace development without some sort of world conflict or world issue that was involved. And so there's so many things that are going on that we can capitalize on. But again, are we going to change by choice or are we going to change by crisis? And right now, Highlands County schools are in crisis um, because there is an option for parents to have for their child to not be involved in the school system and go some other place in some other way. And that's okay. But I would say if the school district is going to maintain its enrollment, it needs to do something as good, if not better, than the alternates that are available to our children and our parents. So there you have it. Again, this particular focus on what we need to do in education and my personal bias about what works and what doesn't work. Um, this podcast will come out on Friday. Also, the article that I would have normally put in a newspaper, but I'm not going to because I'm not going to put more fuel on the controversy community wide. But you can read that article on our website. It'll be on our website same time that this podcast comes out. Learning by doing. Learning by with something that you're invested in, that you care about, that you see as important and valuable. Those are the elements that make education real and meaningful. And again, that's what we need to do for our students. Now, I have to admit, I had it good and well, better than some of our core curriculum at the high school because kids wanted to be in my classes. They were fun, they were engaging, they were learning things that they could apply after they graduated. They saw the value in what they were learning. I'm not, kids weren't going to go out and start a chair building business. No, but they learned how to work safely with tools and how to run a business and how to work as a team and problem solve and market whatever they were going to provide. Those were valuable life lessons. And I've got a number of phone calls over the years of students that have gone on and started their own businesses or were involved in other areas of their career and said, thank you for what you taught me because I learned this, and this is how it's helped me. And again, if it's not valuable, they're not going to be involved in it. And those are the types of things that prove that what we do and how we do it on project-based learning really, really works. And the other thing we found, and I had students often tell me this, the only reason they came to school, the only reason they quote, played the game and did all the other classes to be able to get the credits to graduate. One of the main reasons they came to school was my class or classes that I taught. And then there were other classes, core subjects that had teachers that just made the content come alive. Troy White was one of them, and student after student after student, including my own children that went through the Lake Placid system, loved Troy White because what he taught, he just brought history and that sort of thing alive and made it interesting. And so again, teachers in the classroom are probably the most important resource we have. They're change agents. They're the ones that deliver what we want the students to take away and take into their lives and use. Um, and then the process of which we use and we deliver the content that we want people to learn. Again, my opinion in my experience, would be project-based interdisciplinary intercurriculum learning to make it work and make it work well. We know the examples. We've seen them. We know they work. We've had some examples here in our own county that I've been involved in. It works and it works well, but we need to change how we do it. And it's going to be an evolution rather than a revolution. But the bottom line is this, folks. Change is coming. Now, we can either do it on a crisis level or we can do it on a choice level. And I hope we do it by choice, by designing and developing systems that work. Project-based learning, cross-curricular cooperation between teachers, and it'll have a positive effect. So thanks for tuning in. Again, the article that I've shared about some of these concepts is going to be on the website, flightlines.com. And if you like what you heard this morning on Morning Coffee Edition, hit the subscribe button. We've got lots of other cool topics coming up in the future. Another example of a student that went through our program and opened up his own business here at the Sebring Regional Airport. Very successful business in avionics. Hendricks Field Aviation with Justin Smith. And then we're also going to be interviewing the Duke Propeller program, a French company that makes composite propellers. That is North American headquarters are here in Sebring, and they're going to be building a manufacturing facility here at the airport. So there's lots of good things happening, and we're going to cover them all. So again, thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, and may God bless.